you don't have a community, how are you going to know? Because the whole media apparatus is built to tell you you're not, you're alone. You're the only one that thinks what you think.
Yeah.
And this is what you should be thinking because this is what everyone else really thinks. So, and I don't know if we walked away. I mean, I don't even know. I was a concerted effort. Community and men. That's the question. So, we used to have lodges, we had the Masonic temples, whatever you want to think about that. And we had local pubs where men, these were places where men would go and they would congregate and they would talk. And a lot of times, some of this stuff was centered around sports, but that wasn't really the point. So when you look at we look at the founders and the framers, and during that time, the Civil War, the war against the British, for instance, that was organized in churches and in bars where men used to meet. And these served as hubs where men would talk and they would figure out what they thought about things, as opposed to now where we get our ideas and what we think about things is the TV. Yeah. And then we feel like we have a community because they say, oh, you have this online community.
It's artificial.
When really that's not real, because that's running through, it's an algorithm, and you don't know who these people are, and they're not in your community, so there's not that direct tie. That's not a problem, but it's a problem when you get to the point where you see culture being eroded. And what do you think about this idea?
I actually 100% agree. We had groups like the clubs, like they go to the bar, the pub, they'd go to church, stuff like that, and their focus is no longer about the work at hand, as in we've got to build this building, we've got to clear this brush, whatnot. It wasn't about that. It was about what's on your mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in today's world, now we have the internet and we have, social media. So we don't get to look at people in the eye. We don't get to have this conversation. We have this false sense of protection because we don't have an identity, but at the same time, we don't have an identity. And so therefore we're governed by bullies. Somebody who speaks louder and isn't afraid to be a little more hateful and make you feel chastised because you said something that wasn't politically correct, even though people knew what you meant. Now it's no longer about what do you mean. It's about, well, that sounds bad, so let's not say it that way. Well, pretty soon you dumb down the community, and you take it away. You're like I'm going to I just got invited on my way here to a GOP group out of Tulsa County. Okay. And I was explained the way the different people work. I realized that I actually know most of the people that's in this group on Facebook. Yeah. I've never met them in person and stuff. And then I find out the way they really are. And, this person is a confidant of mine, and, was explained to me how these people are. And I was like, I would have never known it because I'd only seen them on Facebook, and you only show the face you want to see. We wear makeup. Guys wear makeup now. Now it's not on our face. It's on social media because we care about the way we look. Back in the day, we didn't care what we looked because we stood for what we wanted people to trust us.
And I think in a lot of ways, too, when you had those communities, local communities, you saw everything. So you knew who wasn't really doing good if they were putting on for they were putting on. And also, a lot of those bad ideas and a lot of those bad opinions, they would get filtered out because they wouldn't make it out of that community, that small community of men. And that small community of people, it wouldn't make it out of there. So when somebody had a bad opinion, they would sit and they would talk about it, and eventually it would get hammered out because eventually, if it was a bad idea, of course, it would get just taken out. But now all of a sudden, we have these so-called artificial communities, online communities. And I think that, I wouldn't say it's a single source, but I would say it's gone a long way towards pushing down the role of men in society. in Western society and what it means to be a man in Western society, because in Middle Eastern countries and in the East and Oriental, they still have these things.
Yeah.
They still have their community somewhat, for the most part. This is a Western thing, and it's being put in those other countries too, or trying to be, where you're taking the idea away that men getting together it just became some nefarious thing.
Yeah.
It's like they won't let women in. That became some kind of negative thing, and a lot of people bought into that. And I think in a lot of ways too, that reflects on the church and the weakness of the church now, because you go to a lot of these churches and who do you see in there? Mostly you see women.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of men in the church. Men are at home, or men are on their online communities, but they're not in the community that they need to be in, which is in the present right here in Oklahoma or wherever.
Well, the church doesn't represent courage or strength anymore. No.
In what way? What do you mean?
Well, it's like I wasn't a Christian for 37 years of my life, and I'm 41 now. And it's because it was about they chiseled you down. People that would talk to you about, do you want to go to heaven or hell? They'd also tell you about everything you're doing wrong and how you're not perfect. Well, of course we're not perfect. We're ugly human beings. All of us are. We're imperfect. Every one of us are born hypocrites. The battle is to try to work against it. Yes, we need to do that. And that's what church is for. But if you're not allowed to go to church because you've already been judged before you get there, women, they judge themselves enough that they go to church and they look at church a little differently. They look at it like, oh, well, I'm trying to, perfect myself and everything. Guys are a little more, we don't want to go to a self-help group, even though it is one. We will go to a self-help group if you trick us into it. Well, and we start building ourselves.
Well, what do you think the community, what do you think that going to these communities used to be? They were like self-help.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't want to call it that, they would have to sit and they would talk to each other, and men could air the thing that they were feeling. Men don't do that anymore. Now it's become some kind of thing where it's like you got to be macho and you can't. This is some emotional thing, and it's like it's always been a normal thing that people would have a community around them to talk out their issues. Otherwise, they become atomized, and then they'll move to the extreme.
And that's where I was going. You either have guys that are super macho and very gruff, and that's the way I was, or you have the ones that are very limp-wristed and they cry, they're effeminate and stuff. It's because...
And that became the Christian ideal.
Exactly.
Being effeminate, being somebody like... You see that a lot with these mega church pastors, and they're afraid to take a stand. They're afraid to say... Men weren't normally like that. Usually men in the church were the first ones to speak out. Yeah. These were the people, and it's not about being violent or anything. You look at Martin Luther King and his nonviolence movement. They were getting slapped in the face, but these were men. They were dealing with issues. They weren't perfect, but they were men.
He had meetings that would allow that you would get tied up and beat just so you wouldn't give in whenever you went out in real world and got beat. Yeah. He was really practicing pacifism. It's called being bold. A lot of people confuse the word meek and weak, and a lot of men don't know what it is. Meek does not mean weak. It means restrained strength. We're supposed to be bold in the church, and we did have meetings.
Or being nice. You see that a lot with our elected leaders like James Langford, for instance. You can see a lot of times where he tried to tie him doing something weak that was hurting the fabric of Oklahoma or the United States, where he would, like the thing with Columbus Day. He's like he has problems with Columbus Day. He's trying to change it out of some semblance of saying this is the Christian thing to do. If someone's being offended by something, we need to be weak.
Or apologizing to the black community for questioning elections integrity. You know how racist that makes you?
Absolutely racist.
You're sitting there saying that black people don't care about the election integrity?
If anything, they should care the most about election integrity, because they've been the victim of election integrity issues for since forever in this country. So people, and it's where it infects everything. So we could talk about politics, where these leaders think being weak is like the Christian ideal.
Yeah.
And then you look in the communities where you can't even get a pastor to write a note saying that their parishioner shouldn't have to take the vaccine.
Yeah.
They're even weak in that instance.
And they're making other people weak because, in all honesty, you don't need a note. We have the First Amendment right. Do you have to get a note for free speech?
Yeah.
I mean, why do you have to have a note to say that I believe this? Oh, now I have to prove that I really believe this. No, you don't. We don't have to have an organized religion. It doesn't say you have the freedom of organized religion. You have the freedom to believe what you believe, as long as you're not hurting other people.
Well, I think a lot of it goes, and also you're talking about a society that has a problem with there being consequences for anything.
Yeah.
So even when you're right, there are going to be consequences.
Yeah.
Even when you're right, you might still lose.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably will lose. And that's a part of life. And that's something that brisk reality, because I think men and women have different roles, and even in the family.
Yeah.
So the woman, she's the nurturer. She's the one that's supposed to be soft. And I think men have been trying to push them towards that ideal when men, we're supposed to be the cold, brisk reality. And we're supposed to be the one to say, you know what, look, son, the world doesn't care about men. Yeah. And it's not supposed to care about men. You're supposed to care about yourself. You're supposed to go out in this world and build something for yourself. So you need to be talking to God. You need to try to figure out where you fit in this society and the things you're supposed to do. But at the end of the day, if you don't care about where you end up, the world's not going to care, and they're not supposed to care. That's why you see more than likely, we'll let men be homeless on the street. But if we see a woman and children on the street, we're going to deal with that. And I think in a sense we're supposed to.
Yeah.
But being that hard reality has become something that's like, just, oh, men aren't supposed to be like that. We're not supposed to be like that anymore. We're supposed to be softer and kinder and gentler. And it's not about being hard to be hard. It's about being hard to show you the reality of the world, that is tough. And you look at the jobs that men take, we're more likely to die on the job. We have some of the hardest jobs. We work way more hours. It's just like we've always been that protector. That's the way it's always been. And you don't do it just to do it. Like I said, it's not about being tough. It's just that's the role we were always meant to play. But when you take away the community, then you can filter in these lies about what men are really supposed to be. Yeah. And then you get to change a society, because the people that would normally stand up against tyranny in a society have been atomized, and they're in their digital community, and they're making a difference when really they're not.
Yeah. I mean, just because you're really good as a social justice warrior, I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, because everybody has a great plan until they get punched in the face. Exactly. And so I've had to learn not to even argue with people. I don't argue with fools. If it's not going to do any good, I'm not trying to convince you that I'm right or wrong. I'm trying to educate you why I believe what I believe. But I'm also trying to learn from you. I spoke to a gentleman that was a big advocate for BLM, and I didn't trash him or anything. I gave him information that was true and factual and sourced and proven, through the same sources that they're trying to use against me. And all they could say, oh, come from the white guy. I was like, first of all, thanks for being presumptive, because I'm not white. I'm mixed. You wouldn't be surprised, or you'd be surprised. I'm actually 10% of me, which I've got not just in the DNA genealogy, comes from Africa. My blood is just all over the place, which a lot of us are. There's really no such thing. Race was created years ago because they started realizing that the Irish and the blacks were getting together, and they didn't want them to get together, and so they decided let's divide them by race and stuff. And people have gotten to that point. Well, BLM was and I said, you just missed the opportunity that you could have taught me why you're a part of BLM, and maybe I would have joined. But instead, people don't want that. They want to divide, and they don't want you to be a part of a group.
Well, that's what the elites, they want us arguing about race. Yeah. They don't want us to realize this thing is about class, and it's about there is an upper class of, and a lot of times people make it seem like this is some kind of leftist thought when it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
There's an elite at the top, and that is really the source of a lot of problems going on in this world. And the race thing is actually a lot smaller than what you would think, because we're, at the end of the day, we're all working people. We're all middle class people and the issues that we have are small compared to the things that these elites are trying to pull, and that they've always tried to pull a lot of the issues that we see around the world. I mean, look at, there aren't middle class Oklahoma white dudes like you over in Africa testing drugs in Burkina Faso.
Yeah.
That's Pfizer. That's the elites. That's Bill Gates.
Yeah.
You know, that's not normal. The atrocities that go on around the world, they aren't regular middle class white guys walking around like, oh yeah, I hate these darkies. It's
Yeah.
it's more of the elites, and so we're gonna go into that, and we're also gonna talk about actually, I didn't even introduce you, so I'll have to introduce you too. We'll go into that in the next segment, but we'll go after this commercial break. All right, and we're back. So, Joshua, you have Soldier of God Apparel, and a lot of people, it's like, I guess it's controversial, some of the things that you do, and also I would see you as kind of like an old school man of God,
Yeah.
and that's how I've seen you since I've interacted with you. But I mean, you're behind the scenes a lot of different places, and you're pretty much everywhere in this state. I would say, like, if I'm at events and stuff, it's a big event, I see you somewhere bodyguarding for somebody like that. But tell us the story of what made you start Soldier of God, and what is it?
Well, I guess the best way to say I was a police officer for about 11 years. Uh, I quit that, so I could take care of my family, and I started selling cars. And I was not a Christian. I was not. I actually got annoyed by Christians because they're always telling me how basically saying how I wasn't good enough. They didn't say it directly that way. It was usually, you need to quit this and do this and change this. And when you become a Christian, I was like, oh, so God doesn't love me for who I am, so I have to be somebody else. And they're like, no, 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 this. It's like, oh, okay, so God won't love me when I become a Christian until I change. I was like, I don't understand. It was so confusing, and they always spoke Christianese, this language that I didn't grow up with. And then they always wanted to scare me into heaven. I'm like, I grew up in hell. You're not going to scare me into heaven, And so I started working at Nelson Nissan, which is a Christian dealership. They have Christian contemporary rock music playing, and they also had Bible study on Fridays. Well, to be completely honest, part of it was curiosity. That I went to Bible study. The other part was trying to advance my career because I just got out of law enforcement. I was determined to be able to take care of my family. I made $28,000 a year as a sergeant. I couldn't do anything. Well, I started hanging out with Christians, and I heard one cuss, and I thought that was the damnedest thing. I was like, I didn't think y'all could cuss. He's like, well, what made you think that? I was like, the fact that I was told that you can't cuss. And, all this, I wasn't wearing the right clothes. You have to, I'm not sure what kind of tie Jesus wore when he preached, but some churches, you have to wear a right tie and stuff like that. And, well, when I became a Christian, after I realized this, I'm going to condense the story, of course, I started noticing that the only shirts that had substance were Christian shirts, which fine. I'm not hating on that. But they only spoke to other Christians, and they're usually kind of cheaper shirts. They weren't really comfortable. They were just shirts people wanted to say, look at me, I'm blessed. Or say this real pretty words and then have, Romans 12:2 on there or something like that, or Philippians 4:13. Well, the problem is that if I said something really pretty to you, then I put at the bottom of it that it was from the Quran, you're probably not going to listen to it. Well, that's the way a non-believer is. They're like, oh, it's not for me, it's for somebody else. Well, I don't know about you, but when I became a Christian, I actually read what Jesus had read. Well, right before I became a Christian, I was kind of in limbo, and I'm like, Jesus didn't do any of what people are doing now. Jesus did not try to convert people at all. He didn't try to make you become anything. All he did was, if you're a lame person, he showed you could walk. He showed you the power of love and the power that we all have, that ended up teaching them, that we have that power. We are given that power. But all he did was help you. He didn't try to explain anything. He just helped you. And at the most, he'd say, sin no more. Well, they wanted to come back. He used the flesh to bring about the soul. Kind of like God did. He used the flesh of Jesus to bring about our soul, you know? And so I thought about that, and then it hit me. I need a shirt that is talking to people like me, talking to the Trailer Park Joes out there, that don't understand what love thy neighbor is. I know Bill. Bill's a jackwagon. I ain't gonna love up on him. That's what our mindset is. Well, I'm gonna clean it up for your show, but one of the ideas I talked about, it was like, all it's basically saying is, sometimes showing love is just don't be a jackwagon. Just be nice to the guy, even if, that's love, and if we had shirts out there that talked to other people, that looked good, that felt good, felt comfortable, more than good, quality shirts, then maybe the message would get to the right person instead of, and I was not qualified for. I am not qualified for it. I don't know anything about this. My style is cowboy boots, blue jeans, blank t-shirt. Wintertime, cowboy boots, blue jeans, pearl snaps. That's been my way since the 80s. So I didn't know anything about this, but I realized throughout the whole Bible, you read that none of the people that God called on were qualified. He qualified them, because if I had the money, if I had the knowledge, expertise, or anything, could I say it was me or God that did it? And so this is, God's doing this. So that's how my company, Soldier of God Apparel, started.
Okay. And there's also something to be said about the idea that, like we were talking more about in segment 1, about the cold reality of that dads bring to the table with their children, the realities of the world, and that when you love somebody, you tell them the truth. We've twisted that word that, loving someone is also always being nice to them and always making them feel good about their decisions, and not telling them that you're wrong about something. And so I think that's what encapsulates Soldier of God in a lot of ways, is that it's in your face and it's the reality in a lot of ways. And, I think that's a reflection of its founder, who's that type of person. And you also have a podcast that's actually really good, and hopefully it deserves to be like a top podcast, I would think, because the things that basically what your podcast explain to the audience, Joshua's podcast is basically he brings on people, and, it could be political people, it could be pastors or anything like that. And they talk about how they found God. And he just lets them talk, and I was on that show, and it was really good. I think it was therapeutic. And we'll go into the next segment, and we'll talk more about the things that he has going on after this commercial break. All right, and we're back. And Joshua's going to tell us some of the things he has going on and where you can see him, the podcast and all these other things. So when does the next season of the podcast come out? Do you know? Do you have any idea?
I don't know an exact date. Hopefully it'll be within the next few weeks.
Well, we'll plug that in the comment section below, and you can go check out some of his past shows. They're really good. I would recommend that you look into it. And also, you're going to be speaking somewhere.
Yeah,
pretty soon.
Northwest Arkansas, at a church called Engaged Ministers Church. I don't quite know the exact location right as of yet, but it's going to be the November 20th or 21st.
Okay.
I'll be speaking there.
Is it going to be live streamed or anything?
I know it's going to be recorded. I don't know if they do live stream or anything, so I will have a recording of it, and it'll be on my YouTube. And my YouTube is actually SOG TV.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's uppercase SOG and then lowercase TV. You'll notice it's the right one because you'll see me and a Indian guy sitting side by side. The first 6 episodes of my podcast was actually with me and an ex-con.
Okay.
Ex-cop, ex-con.
Yeah, so that was the dynamic. It was him and an ex-con, and so that dynamic was like really cool. So that's kind of what drew me in, was that dynamic, and they were both 2 men speaking from the heart about things that they thought about, high level type stuff, things that men used to do outside of the internet, outside of forums in the digital community space. Talking about your feelings, I wouldn't consider that to be weak. I consider that to be therapeutic and something that is absolutely necessary. And that if you aren't doing that, the enemy will have ways to come into your life if you're not talking about and verbalizing the things that you're dealing with.
I have a question, because people do call it weak. I called it weak. But if you're doing something hard, is it weak?
Absolutely.
It's not, because if you're doing it and it's hard, that means you're strong because you're doing it. It's weak if you run away from something because it's hard.
Yeah.
And so, talking about your emotions, talking about feelings, and the stuff that people don't want to.
What you think about things.
Exactly. A lot of us didn't have fathers. We didn't have that example, and our group was playing football, stuff like that, doing everything, them clubs and groups, and now it's just, what do you have?
Yeah.
Without
now it's considered nefarious if men are getting together. Really, it is. I mean, they've turned that into something that's like, oh, these men, look at they're getting together. What are they doing behind these closed doors? They're not doing anything. They're figuring out what they think about things in their life, and they're figuring out like, hey, I'm the breadwinner of my family, and I don't know how to deal with that. Yeah. Or, hey, we're having financial issues, and I really don't know how to address it. Or I'm having problems with my kid, or, these are important things. And they used to happen at the local level, and they don't anymore. And I think that has a lot to do with some of the problems that we're facing in society.
I think it has a lot to do with most of the problems, is that we're not allowed to come together and talk about things that are difficult to talk about, because if you could be I was having a conversation, is actually between me and another black man who's an older black man. We're having a conversation, and it was very, I don't care, and I told him, I said, I don't care if you call me racist. I don't care what people think about me, because I know I'm not. It actually makes you seem more racist when you're defensive and you're walking on eggshells because you don't want to offend their race. Why would it offend their race if you're just being honest? We should be.
That goes back to being honest with people. When you're afraid to be honest, it does, yeah, because
if you're starting a business, like my t-shirt, and I didn't mean to cut you off, and I've asked people what they really believe about my shirts. I was like, because I just spent $10,000 of money that I did not have to buy these shirts. Now, if everybody I talked to was just wanting to be nice and didn't want to hurt my feelings, how successful did they help me become, or how much of a loser did they help me become just because they're trying to be nice to me? Absolutely. You need to be, it's a Band-Aid. Just tell me the truth. Now, you can tell the truth in a nicer way, but that doesn't mean straight up lie. Why? I don't do white lies. Me and my wife, when we got together, and I'm on my 3rd wife, because I didn't know how to be a man. I had to learn. I had to fail a lot, and now I know, my wife, when we start, she's younger than me. She's 11 years younger than me. And when we first got together, and she'd start arguing about something, I was like, oh, is this the one? Is this the one you're going to remember in 2 years? And she got annoyed by it, but eventually it caught on that, I learned that some things aren't worth it. Some things are. And it was because I had to fail. Well, we can actually prevent ourselves from failing so much if we get together and talk about things that are hard, that we don't know I don't know how to fix this. We don't have to raise a son that's going to be a drug addict because we don't know how to talk to him, because we have somebody else that has been through this, and they know how to talk.
We let the schools talk to him.
Oh God, that's probably the worst thing.
We let exterior people talk to him instead of talking to him first.
I was a statistic according to the schools. They in fourth grade, they told me, counselor actually took me in her office and told me that I was probably going to be a druggie, probably going to be a child abuser. There's a good chance I'm going to be in prison, an alcoholic, all this stuff. I wasn't going to finish school. I mean, and I'm in fourth grade. You know, what is that? 9 years old, 8 years old. You know, it's just, but that's what the teachers are learning. They're teaching you based on statistics. Well, we're not statistics. You know,
and they're teaching you based on their values.
Yeah.
And do you want someone that you don't know that's not in your community?
Yeah.
Because we used to have this thing called a community. Yeah. And it wouldn't be a problem, I don't think, if they were in that community. Because there used to be a time when the teachers were in that community. Yeah. And you knew the teachers, and they knew you, and they knew your expectations, and you knew who they were. And now that, like I said before, you're atomized, you don't even know who your neighbors are. Yeah. And that's a convicting thing, because we're supposed to be involved, but we don't even know who our neighbors are. That's why a lot of times now, it happens all the time. There's something crazy going on somewhere, like someone has someone kidnapped in their house, and they're like, I never said 2 words to the guy and the guy next door. And it's like, we never used to have that. Because you knew who the weirdos were, because you guys were all getting together and you were sorting things out in your community.
Could you imagine if somebody came over and said, can I borrow a cup of sugar? That was normal back in the day.
That was definitely normal.
You know, that was normal in the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, now you're
This is a new thing.
Yeah.
This atomization is a new thing. And we've turned it into a virtue to just be a private person. And we've turned the word community into a 4-letter word, like it's some commie thing. When really it's how society's been structured since time and millennium, you know. Yeah. You look at the core of what made, I mean, you have communities was what makes a region, and then that makes a country. Yeah. And so these are the basic building blocks of any society. And I think the only thing that's holding us together right now is holding this America together from really going off the cliff. Are our Judeo-Christian values. I think that we know in our gut that something isn't right, and the way that we're doing things right now isn't right, and we kind of have an idea what the problems are, but nobody really knows how to address it, because, like I said before, you've taken the men out, and you've made being weak, and you made being meek, and you try to tie that to Christianity, weakness, weak men, and that's the problem.
Yeah. That's 100% the problem. That's actually part of what my talk is, you know, here in a month is actually on, you know, well, it's tied into that. They don't realize that that's what my talk is going to go into, but they were like, how do you talk to people like me? You know, I call it the trailer park Joes, you know, the guys that didn't grow up around Christianity and stuff. Well, it's because the church is so weak, and you're taught that if you're different, you know, they misquote Romans 12:2. Say, well, we're not supposed to be of this world. Great. Do you not drive a car? You're of this world. That's not what it means. It's mindset.
You know it when you see it.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. And when you're pushing people away and keeping strength from ever joining the church, imagine Peter, you know, he was a jackwagon. I'm trying to keep it clean for you. So you don't have to push the buzzers or anything. But, you know, he was very bold, very outspoken. I mean, he cut a guy's ear off in front of Jesus. And this was after he's already towards the end of Jesus's life. You know, he was that way, that impassioned. Well, now, if Peter was around here, he would be kicked out. He wouldn't be allowed at the church. Paul? I mean, they're like, oh, look how horrible you were. Kind of like, you know, Trump. He had a past. It wasn't really that bad of a past, but people like to find it. I'm like, oh, so he can't be a man of God because of his past. Oh, I didn't know that. That's how that worked. Look at most people like Matthew and all them, you know, God forbid, look at King David. The man slept with a married woman, got her pregnant, tried getting her husband killed, or tried tricking him first, couldn't do it, so he got him killed. And he was considered a man after God's own heart. We make mistakes, and the people are teaching, and the church is teaching, mistakes are bad. They're not bad, they're human. You know, that's how we learn. And because we don't like making mistakes, and especially if you grew up without a father, you don't realize that it's okay to make mistakes because you're the man. We don't understand what being a man is.
I think we're pretending to be men. Well, we think men are because we didn't have men fathers growing up. So we're pretending what some character of a man supposed to be.
Clint Eastwood.
When that's absolutely not correct.
That was my father figure growing up. Clint Eastwood. I was like, that's me. People would say, because I had friends that watched westerns and stuff, and they'd talk about what's his name, John Wayne. I was like, John Wayne was not a real cowboy or a real man. He was an actor. I was like, Clint Eastwood was a real man. And that's who. So I emulated what I thought a real man would be, and we'll kind of find out. I was like, I never saw Clint Eastwood cry. My wife saw me cry for the first time like 2 weeks ago. For the very first time. My wife doesn't even know half or most or hardly anything about my growing up because I didn't grow up knowing how to talk to people.
We spent a lot of time crying in Afghanistan. I can tell you the roughest people I've ever met, stone cold killers. These people cry.
That's what men do.
Yeah.
But you're taught. You don't.
But you ain't supposed to be around here blubbering and being a little pansy.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a time and a place.
Exactly.
You got to let certain emotions out.
Now, I still can't understand people crying over pain. That would never make sense
Crying
to me.
over pain?
Yeah. It's like I saw a kid.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I don't really cry getting in pain.
I remember being a sophomore in high school, seeing this kid. We called him Rabbit. I mean, he could run, and he was running, and his leg hyperextended and bent backwards.
Holy crap.
And he starts crying. I was like, what is he doing? I didn't understand it. Because, when I was in 6th grade, I had my sternum completely shattered, and I didn't even cry. Because it doesn't make sense to me. So, because I didn't grow up around that. I was like, men don't cry. Clint Eastwood never cried.
That's funny.
But it's my distorted version, and we have distorted version of men now. It's okay to be effeminate, No, it's not. It's okay to be in touch with your feelings. It's okay to be a man. But being a man does not mean you're better than a woman. I asked my son, I was like, what does a leader of a house mean? What's head of household mean? He said, well, that means that you're the boss and that you get. I was like, no, it doesn't. Head of household means the responsibility lies on your shoulders.
Everything's on your shoulders.
Exactly. I was like, but I always talk to my wife because we are equals. We have different jobs, though. I'm not better than her, and she's not better than me.
Her job is gravely important.
Very.
The job is gravely important.
Our relationship wouldn't work if either one of us quit doing our job.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to close this out, and hopefully you guys got a taste of a little bit of, kind of what his podcast is about. Like I said, high-level ideas. So if you want to check that out, go to Soldier of God on YouTube. And definitely check him out. That will be in the description. And he'll definitely be around a lot more going forward. And I guess until next time, I'll see you guys next week.